The only point I'm making with this is just that I think that it was evolutionarily adaptive for humans to be fundamentally contentious because
Mhm.
it helped us to stay in small groups and to be ecologically sustainable in relatively small groups. But I mean, I have to amend that a little bit because the county where I live has about, I don't know, 30 some thousand people now. And prior to conquest, prior to the Europeans arriving, the population was like 12 or 15,000 because there were so many salmon that a lot of people could live here. But that doesn't alter the
Mhm.
fact that they still would have conflicts with their neighbors, and they didn't uh, aggregate into a megacity. And I think that there is evolutionary wisdom in not aggregating.
Well, yeah, I think that, the idea of when we talk about humanism, whether it's Confucian or it comes from the Enlightenment, we human beings have the intellectual capacity to understand universals like universal human rights. But this thing about contention, I think, if we take that evolutionary view, like you talk about, I think that it probably does play a role when people start to live too close together and all of that, which would, as you say, keep things in line, And when you start amassing a lot of people together, say in a city or whatever, and they have to fight over resources, now you start to have not only contention, like this kind of little bit irritable back and forth, that might keep us apart. But if you go beyond contention, now you've got serious conflict.
Oh, I agree. And then the reason I was just shaking my head is because I was thinking another problem. Again, I want to protect as much of the world for non-humans as possible. But another problem with this is that, okay, so let's pretend this all happens. Set aside 50% of the world, uh, trees start growing back, and then suddenly somebody discovers some more oil on that
Right.
50% that's been set aside, or somebody else discovers, uh, I mean, the trees grow back enough that they're worth cutting again. I mean, it's if we're going to fantasize, I mean, so it can never happen because somebody's going to want to steal the land and somebody's going to want to steal the resources in that land, steal the oil, gold, whales, whatever, whoever's there. And
Mhm.
so if we're going to fantasize that we can set aside 50% and protect it, why don't we go fantasize that we have a voluntary transformation where we scale down on purpose? It's like,
Well,
they're both fantasies.
yeah, I'd say that's a fantasy too, but it's certainly one that we can aim for.
It's, and frankly, if we had a voluntary contraction, there wouldn't be resource wars because we'd be voluntarily, but of course that would make capitalism collapse because capitalism requires. So you said that you had another quote you wanted to do.
Yeah, let's do one more quote from the book. This one, you talk about R.D. Laing, the famous psychiatrist, in your work, particularly, I think if I recall, it was around human supremacy. And I want to quote something that I found here. Uh, like I took these out of the Half-Earth book. So let me introduce this techno-optimist position. And this is Wilson again, but he's talking about the techno-optimism. Some believe that humanity should accept the ecological chaos we have created as just damage collateral to a brilliant destiny. We are as gods, the futurist Stuart Brand has written, and we have to get good of it, end quote. Brand writes again, the earth is our planet. This vision continues to zigzag logic, and our ultimate role is to take control of all of it. Uh, now, you have Wilson again. A few kerfuffles here and there, economic crashes, climate change, religious wars notwithstanding, we are getting better in every way all the time. We travel even faster around the globe, reach higher and probe deeper, and look farther across the universe. We are collectively learning at an exponential pace everything the big God permits us little gods to learn, and are putting all the knowledge within the reach of everyone by a few keystrokes. We are pioneers of a whole new kind of existence, Homo sapiens, the amazing species on two legs with free hands and a cerebrum-packed global skill on its skull on its way. Now, Wilson, he's taking the perspective of science today and not of, say, techno-optimism, which Brand takes. When we talk about, say, like psychological or, you know, eco-psychology, what do you see in this?
Sociopathy. That's one of the most sociopathic things. I can't imagine anything that anybody could say that would be more sociopathic than to say that it's our planet and we're supposed to take control of all of it. I have a few responses, of course. One of them is I always thought that, and our species name, by the way, is not Homo sapiens, it's Homo sapiens sapiens. And I always thought that I always thought they added the second sapiens to make sure that we got the joke.
Right.
And because it is a joke. I mean, can you imagine calling yourself? I mean, this is what a dictator does. You know, the most magnificent. I mean, who would name your own species sapiens? It's just nuts. And apart from which, we're killing the planet, which is literally the stupidest thing you can do. Next, it's not really
Derrick,
our planet.
Can you talk
Sure.
about what sapiens is? Yeah.
Well, let's look it up real quick just to make sure we have the exact definition.
We'll have fact check.
Yeah, we'll run a fact check. Sapiens. Definition. Oh, come on. You're being stupid. The name we have selected for ourselves means wise human. Homo is the Latin word for human, of course, and sapiens is derived from a Latin word that means wise or astute. And would you go around and call yourself Layne the Wise? I mean, it's fine if somebody else gives you that name, but if you
I
give
do
yourself
that,
name,
then shoot me, Derrick.
Exactly. So anyway, and this notion, okay, that's the first thing is I just want to make a joke about that. Second thing is that I really recommend that people read a book by David Ehrenfeld called The Arrogance of Humanism. And David Ehrenfeld's great. I have a few disagreements. He's an Orthodox Jew, so he does believe in the monotheism, but that doesn't alter the fact that A, he loves the planet, and B, he makes a really powerful case that essentially humanism has replaced God with humans. And that's what Stuart Brand's talking about right here. This is such a great example of exactly the arrogance of humanism. That at least with God, he says, there were some limits, that we don't know everything. But now people like him believe we know so much. And one of the things that David Ehrenfeld talks about that I just love is he says, because we can commit minor miracles, we think that means we can commit major miracles. And what he means by that is there are plenty of minor miracles. Open heart surgery is a minor miracle. Antibiotics, minor miracle. The fact that we're using this computer, that's a minor miracle. You know, we're literally across the planet from each other, and I can see the sun outside your window. And if it were daylight here and I was against a window, you could see it here. You could see the night here if I was outside. If I walked outside right now, you could hear the rain across the planet. That's a minor miracle. But he says because we can commit minor miracles, we think we can commit major miracles like manage a forest or manage any natural community without destroying it. And we can't. And it's the hubris. I mean, did none of these people ever read the story of Icarus when they were children? You know, this is all the story of Icarus. You don't fly too close to the sun. And I see zero evidence of any extractive economy not destroying the land base that it's extracting from. I see zero evidence. It's like you live in Southeast Asia, and do we want to talk about what has happened in the last 30 years to the Mekong Delta catfish? It went from one of the largest, if not by weight, the largest land, by which I mean non-ocean, animal migrations bigger than the Serengeti in terms of weight. The Mekong Delta catfish migrating up the river, and now they're endangered. In 30 years, that's happened. And that goes to what we were saying too. All the local communities who have lived on and with Mekong Delta catfish for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they are having to move to cities, which is exactly the point we're talking about, because they can no longer eat all the catfish they used to eat. It's just, this arrogance of believing that, and also we're getting better in every way all the time. I'm sorry, blue whales would not agree, and Mekong Delta catfish wouldn't agree, and every living being. Another thing, I started to say this and then I stopped, was that if it's anybody's planet, it's bacteria's planet, because bacteria do the real work.
They're going to win.
They're going to win, and they also are the ones who are keeping everybody alive. You know, I love E.O. Wilson. One of the things that I always loved about what he said is that, or one of the things he said that I loved was, if humans disappeared tomorrow, the world would go along fine. And if beetles disappeared, the world would collapse instantly. You know, beetles are infinitely more important to the continuation of life on the planet than we are. And same with bacteria. We can list any number. You know, there are any number of species who, you know, I love elephants, and I think elephants are important. You know, you get rid of elephants and the world can continue. I'm not saying that we should get rid of them or they should be gotten rid of, but, you know, insects as a class, I mean, it's an insect planet more than it's a human planet. It's a bacteria planet way more. You could argue it's a virus planet too. I mean, all of those are far more important for, and it's just the arrogance too of claiming. And here's another thing, is so many indigenous people have said to me that our notion of, okay, there's not a problem with ownership as such, that, you know, this was Tolowa land and still is Tolowa land where I live right now, Tolowa Indians. But the difference is whether you think that ownership means you have the right to control and manipulate it, or ownership means you have the responsibility to be in relationship with it. You know, it's like, I can say my sister, I can say my mom, you know, that's mine. It's not your mom, it's my mom, but that doesn't mean that I get to, you know, do horrible things. What that means is that we're in a relationship and I have certain responsibilities toward that person. And if you want to turn it all around, well, and also this is just ecological knowledge, that if you don't live that way, then your way of life won't continue because you'll mess everything up.
There's a lot of magical stuff that you talk about in your books that I think would be a good way to end a discussion of this ultra-urbanization. And one thing that you and I have talked about before in private is the intelligence that animals have. And this is something I find to be quite magical, although it's perfectly natural, right? This kind of non-theistic mysticism is something that's really interesting to me. So you've written about not the elephants, the whales will create, what are they breathe. There's so many whales breathing that it actually creates a climate. or that they will hunt by working together to get or maybe that's dolphins, but they'll get the fish that they want to eat in a certain area. Can we end up with some of this kind of
Oh,
amazing?
sure. Sure. There's a few stories. One is there's a type of whale, I don't remember which type, that will blow bubbles in a ring. And
Yeah.
the fish don't want to swim out of the ring. And so they'll blow bubbles in a circle, and then they will swim up in the middle and catch the fish. Or there's also, don't quote me on the types of the species, but there's interspecies cooperation between, I think it's groupers and eels. And what they'll do, it's so cool. I've seen videos of this where the eel will be hanging out in its little rocky place, and the grouper will come, and the grouper is one, I'm not sure if it's that species, but I think so. Anyway, will come and nod his head outside, and it's an invitation. Let's go get some food. And so the moray eel comes out, and then they present a double bind to a fish, because if the fish swims in the ocean, the grouper grabs it. If the fish swims into a crevice, the eel gets it. And the same thing happens with badgers and coyotes, that they will together hunt prairie dogs. And if the prairie dog goes underground, the badger goes after it. If it tries to run, the coyote gets it. And I've seen a fair number of videos of them working together. Another interesting example is turkey vultures have a fabulous sense of smell, and California condors don't have a particularly good sense of smell. But what they do is they fly way above, they soar above the turkey vultures. And when they see the turkey vultures smelling something, they'll come down. And that's like, well, you could say they're just being thieves, but the California condors have much stronger necks and beaks. So sometimes they just take food from the turkey vultures, but sometimes they're able to break open a tough hide that the turkey vulture couldn't have opened. And so it ends up actually benefiting both of them. There's all sorts of examples of cooperation like that. And then there's just, and people are going to start thinking I'm crazy with this, but this has been replicated, that it ends up that trees make decisions as to where to grow their limbs based on how sunlight is going to hit. Because it never occurred to me until I read the research on this. It was like, why does a tree limb grow a certain place and not another place? And they're actually based on predictions of where the sun is going to come through the canopy in a few years. When the tree
you said that the tree may even have predictive power, right? That's what you're getting at. It's not a posteriori when the sun's coming, but it's prior to the sun arriving.
This is correct. And they also have, we haven't really talked about this very much, but plants communicate all the time through sending off pheromones. Like if a caterpillar is eating this plant over here, then it will send out signals saying to other plants, change the chemical composition of your leaves so that it's not palatable to this caterpillar. And when I first was reading about that, I got another story to tell about that in a second. When I was first reading about that, I read one critic of it saying, that's not possible, because why would they try to help some other plant? There's no reason for them to try to help some other plant. And I said that to my niece. I was telling my niece about that criticism of it. And she's like, do these people not understand community? I mean, this is how community works. If you and I are somewhere, like what would be a big predator where you live?
The Mekong catfish, if they were there, but there's not very many of them. There's tigers,
okay, so
but again, not many of those either.
Okay, there's not many of them, but let's say there is a tiger. I don't mean to make tigers sound all scary, but say there is a tiger and it's rushing toward me and you see it, you might say, hey, Derrick, watch out for the tiger. It's like, but these scientists were saying plants wouldn't do it. But the point is that plants can communicate. And then there's this woman who's done this great work. This is a scientist woman, Monica Gagliano. She's fabulous. She's so great. She did this study, the sensitive plants, mimosa, that if you touch the leaves, they fold up. So she did this experiment where she would put them on a little pedestal, and then they would drop like 3 inches, and that would shock the plant, and it would scare it, and it would close. And she did this experiment where she would do that repeatedly over time, and what she found is that the plants learned that this wasn't a threat. So after a few times of being dropped, the plants would stop responding to the threat and would stay open. And different plants learned more quickly than other plants. Some plants picked it up pretty quickly. Some plants, it took them a while. And she tried to get this published. And when she first tried to get it published, various places would not publish it, not because the data was bad, but because she used the word learning associated with plants. And she refused to put it in scare quotes. She would say the plants are learning. And they're saying, no, they're adapting. It's like, no, they're not adapting, because the adaptation is through evolution, through generations. And this is happening over a couple of days.
This happened quickly, right?
Yeah, it's happening very quickly. And she refused to give in to that. And the point is that the plants were learning that this is actually not a threat, and you don't have to worry about it. And it's just, the world, here's the real point, is the world, and this doesn't even, oh man. So they've done studies too, that if you take a tree from the understory of a forest and you put it in a greenhouse and give it the same amount of light as it has in the understory of the forest, it will die. But what's happening is mushrooms are taking nutrients, fungal networks are taking nutrients from trees who don't need it and giving the nutrients to the trees who do. And so if you want to talk about it being anybody's planet, it's a mushroom planet, because the mushrooms are managing the forests and they're making the forest healthier by doing it. And my point really with all this is 2 points that I want to make. One of them is that the world is far more magnificent than we normally think about. And the other is, like David Ehrenfeld and others have said, the world's not only more complex than we think, it's more complex than we're capable of thinking.
Right. I call that non-theistic mysticism.
Yeah, we need to really give up on the idea that we're in control. We need to give up on the idea that, here's another one. It's just extraordinary. So I had open heart surgery 3.5 years ago. And prior to that, my arteries into my coronary arteries got clogged. And what the coronary arteries did is they threw out arteries around the block, around the blockage. And it's like, how did they know where to grow? Think about it. They're not growing randomly. They're not growing out my skin. They're growing around the block. So actually going out from the artery, making a curve and coming back after that's pretty smart. And you know what? I didn't think about it. That was my body's intelligence.
Right.
And, there is this embodied intelligence in, this is part of the problem. This is core to the problem, is the idea that what we create with our minds is worth something, and what is created with the intelligence. Here, what are the greatest works of art on the planet? The Sistine Chapel, the Mona Lisa, Beethoven's Ninth. You can accuse me of ethnocentrism because I can't think of anything from, China or something, but, or Ming vase, it doesn't matter. There are these great works of art. I'm sorry, what about the Song of a Meadowlark? What about a sunrise? What about a sunset? Those are not considered art. And that's the problem right there, is that what we create up here, it's like scientists get so excited when they create enzymes in a laboratory. Oh my God, we're on the verge of creating life. You know what? I saw a baby snake today. That baby snake was created by a mother snake. And, this is,
I told you. We were talking one time and I said to you something about, somebody had said something like, we still don't know how to create babies. They're talking about some kind of technological fix. I said, have you ever heard of a woman? I mean, this is like it's like biology, you know?
Yep. But that doesn't count. That doesn't count at all.
Right. It has to be technology.
And that's the problem right there, is that we don't respect. Or here's another thing: the greatest inventions in the history of humans, the wheel, the lever, the screw, the greatest history inventions ever: lever, screw, water pump, gunpowder. I don't know. We can come up with all the inventions. Internal combustion engine. I'm sorry. What about proprioception? That's how you can tell where your hands are when you're not looking at them. What about sex? If I had a choice between sex and gunpowder, I'd rather have sex. Those don't count as inventions, though, because the world created them. What
Can I
about
quote you
vision?
on that?
What about vision? Vision is a wonderful creation. What about the
Right.
sense of taste? What about metabolism? Those are wonderful creations. If some human scientist created a robot that could see and can metabolize, they'd win a Nobel Prize. But we see a house fly and we want to kill it because, but it flies and metabolizes, but that doesn't count because it's not human. So anyway, that's all.
When it comes to understanding, you've seen this video where it's a magpie and it wants to get a drink of water in a bottle, Yeah, and so I'll explain it so people that are listening. So there's a bottle set there, a water bottle, and the water's put at a certain point where the magpie can't get its beak down into it. So what it does is it goes and gets rocks and puts them in there until the water comes up, and then it drinks the water, and it goes get more rock and put it in there and so forth. And this is classic. What is it? Archimedes. Now
Yep.
the bird doesn't know mathematics. It doesn't have to. It understands the concept, without having to do mathematics, right? It can do that. It's pretty important, I think.
And I don't know whether they understand mathematics or not, because they've done studies on honeybees that
they can count, right? Yeah.
They can count and they can also predict. So if you put honey at 9 a.m., you put a little bit of honey on a table right here one day, and then right here the next day, and then right here the next day, they can predict, and they're waiting at the new spot, at 8:59.
Yeah.
They're waiting. So they saw the pattern and were able to extend it.
It's extraordinary what we miss. I mean,
Yeah.
When you talk about GDP, all of this is totally missed. Just
It's
not
completely missed.
non-existent.
Well, that's because we're little gods, and that's because Earth is our planet, and we're collectively learning at an exponential pace everything the big God permits us little gods to learn. It's like, this is all such crap anyway. I know we have to go, but I need to say this too. We're collectively learning at an exponential pace everything the big God permits us little gods to learn, putting all that knowledge within the reach of everyone by a few keystrokes. So in my book Dreams, I dealt with this because Sam Harris said that like an ignoramus today would be much smarter would have much more knowledge than somebody who lived 500 years ago. And I ripped it apart with some people 500 years ago. But then I also said, no, what's happened is that our knowledge has changed. That like right now, do your listeners know whether the moon is waxing or waning?
Right.
And everybody, I guarantee every single person on the planet 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago knew every night whether the moon was waxing or waning. And could everybody who's listening to this, within 20 minutes or within 2 hours, could they catch and kill something to eat? And would they know how to field dress a rabbit?
This statement, you're talking about Harris, the philosopher, Sam Harris.
Yeah.
This statement seems to be totally, I don't know how he could even make that kind of statement. I mean, the people that we have more information today
No,
But
we don't. We have
like you
different
say, I mean, I
we
think
have
we have more
different.
information, but I think that the people at those times, like you said, they knew the sun and the moon and when they were coming. They knew like the seeds that it goes on and on, you know. My
Oh,
my
oh,
my mother-in-law, let me tell you about my mother-in-law. She'll come to
uh-huh.
our farm and she'll pick out all kinds of stuff that I never saw before. And I mean, it's my home, right? I mean, this is an incorrect statement on his part.
Oh, and it's the same. The reason I said it is because of the statement here about we're collectively learning at an exponential pace and we're putting all knowledge in the reach of everyone by a few keystrokes. No, this is not. I mean, it's just, he's saying the same thing Sam Harris is. And exactly, it's like I can tell you, okay, if I say Britney Spears, you can probably picture her, right? Or if I say Donald Trump, you can picture him. You know, we know, or George Clooney, you know, it's like there are these celebrities that we can say,
Mhm.
but how many people can name 10 species of edible plants and fungi within 100 yards of their home? You know, it's
Right.
like, and that would
Right.
have been absolutely common knowledge. So it's different knowledge. Or here's another thing. People 100 years, 500 years ago, sorry, not 100, people 500 years ago could navigate by starlight. I could
Right.
not, to save my life, I could not. I don't even know if I can find the North Star. I mean, I don't know anything about it. And I'll tell you something else about nature. You know, dung beetles, the ones that they get poop and then they roll it along and they will
Yeah.
take it.
Yeah.
You know how they navigate? They navigate by the stars.
Really?
Yeah, they
Hmm.
see the stars and so they can go around. That's how they can go around a rock. They're not just going in a straight
Ah,
line.
right.
Um, and it's anyway, the point is that it's just absolutely foolhardy to say we have more knowledge now. I mean, 500 years ago, most people probably could have built a chair or built a house or built a dwelling.
Mhm.
I couldn't build a dwelling. Are you kidding? I can barely use a hammer. Um, and it's just, and like I was
Wait a minute,
saying,
wait a minute, you're an eco-philosopher. Can you grow food? Let me ask you, let me put you on the spot.
um, I have grown. Yeah, I was a commercial beekeeper for a while, so I can grow some food. Um, I've always been better with animals than plants.